6 spine-chilling law enforcement tales exposing sinister secrets and terrifying abandonment. Emily stumbled through the parking lot, shadows looming like monstrous figures around her. After a treacherous 12-hour shift at the hospital, exhaustion wrapped around her like a suffocating shroud. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting a yellow glow that only deepened her anxiety. As she trudged towards her home in Maplewood, a police car parked menacingly across the street caught her eye. The dimmed lights sent a chill racing down her spine. Should V felt reassuring. Instead, an unease gnawed at her core. The whispers she'd overheard at work about troubling disappearances echoed in her mind, linking the missing people to the very officers meant to protect them. With each step, she felt as if the ground beneath her was collapsing into an abyss of dread. Who could be trusted when authority turned sinister? Her routine continued, yet everything felt eerily distorted. Smiles from neighbors morphed into unsettling sneers. Once friendly banter soured into disapproving whispers. The laughter of children on the streets clashed with an ominous hum that made her stomach tighten. Lucas, her precious little boy, grew increasingly withdrawn, speaking in frightened tones of strange men watching from the shadows. Each morning, Emily pushed the gnawing terror down, determined to keep life sweet and normal for him. But the weight of dread pressed heavily against her chest, a constant reminder that something was deeply wrong. One evening, while clearing dust-laden boxes in the attic, Emily made a chilling discovery: a tarnished police badge, half covered in old newspapers. Its gleaming insignia shone like a beacon of warning, igniting memories of her grandfather's tales warning her of the darkness hidden beneath the badge's shiny exterior. With every click of her computer keys, the truth revealed itself with bone-chilling clarity. The articles detailed crime and corruption. The sacred duty of law enforcement turned into a nightmare for Maplewood residents, a place she thought was safe. The names and addresses of the missing lined up ominously with her neighbors. Panic surged in her veins. The realization that these friends might harbor terrible secrets gripped her heart in an iron fist. Just as panic clawed at her insides, a loud, authoritative knock shattered her thought process. It resonated through her home like a death knell, cold terror tightening around her throat. Peering through the peephole, she saw the unmistakable figures of 2 officers, their expressions grim and hunting. Her heart raced. The articles warned about inquiries, dark lines drawn against anyone daring to dig too deep. In an instant, she was no longer just a mother. She was prey in a trap, her instincts screaming at her to act. Suddenly, she heard Lucas's innocent voice from the back of the house, cutting through the suffocating dread. A lethal panic descended on her. Was her child in danger? The officers knocked again, more insistent this time, as if they could smell her fear. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest. Who could help her now? When the very people sworn to serve were the source of horror, where could she turn? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every second, the fear seeped deeper. Emily's breath quickened, her mind racing hide or confront. The heavy knock echoed like a countdown, and the adrenaline coursed through her. Everything hinged on this moment. One push could turn everything upside down. But standing there, she faced a terrifying truth. Every neighbor, every friend, might just be wearing a mask, hiding their darkest secrets beneath a haunting smile. The door trembled again. As dread settled over her once more, she knew that the reckoning was at her doorstep. How could she protect Lucas when danger stood in plain sight? Would she be able to uncover the truth? Or would the darkness consume them both? The door rattled again, a relentless thud that echoed through the hallway like a funeral march. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, each beat loud enough to drown out the voice of her child. Lucas's innocent call grew fainter, swallowed by fear that clung to the corners of their home like a shadowy fog. "Mommy?" he whispered from the back room, his voice tremulous and small. Emily's instinct kicked in. She had to protect him. Thinking quickly, she rushed to the hallway closet, stashing the tarnished badge deep beneath old coats, hoping it wouldn't tee out her as a threat to the very men who loomed outside, men she once believed stood for justice. The officer's knocks intensified, weaving a hypnotic, sinister rhythm that rattled her nerves. She peeked out again, her breath hitching at the sight of their uniformed forms. The cops stood like sentinels, rigid and foreboding, eyes scanning the entrance with an unsettling intensity. "What do you want?" she called, her voice shaking. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions. It's urgent," one officer responded, the flatness of his tone sending a chill through her veins. "Urgent? For whom?" The neon flicker of the streetlight seemed to flicker in agreement. She felt as if she was teetering on the edge of a gaping abyss. Emily hesitated. Sweat trickled down her spine, her mind racing through possibilities. Would questioning them shine a light on their dark intentions, or would it pull her deeper into their web? She couldn't risk it. Not now, when Lucas needed her the most. "Mommy!" His voice broke through her tumultuous thoughts, urgency rising with each syllable. "Stay quiet, sweetheart," she hissed, forcing her voice to remain steady, though dread twisted it like a knife. Outside, the officers exchanged glances. The air felt electric, charged with a dangerous curiosity. They sensed fear, and it only emboldened them. "Emily, we need you to open the door. It's about the recent reports. The missing kids." Her blood ran cold. Any mention of the children sent panic coursing through her veins. The police, those seemingly trustworthy figures, were linked to the very nightmares that haunted her every night. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, bravely, her voice trembling despite her words. "Listen." The second officer's tone turned from authoritative to deceptive, a honeyed trap that made her skin crawl. "This isn't just about you. You're the last person seen with enough," she shouted, her fury a thin veil against the suffocating fear. Silence engulfed the house. The gravity of her words hung heavy in the air. Then, just as suddenly, the first officer spoke again, his voice laced with a predatory calm that made her skin prickle. "Then you won't mind if we come in for a moment?" A warning bell rang in her mind. She had no idea what they would do inside, or how deep their corruption ran. Desperation clawed at her heart as she fought to hold on to the thread of control slipping ever further away. "Mommy, please." Lucas's soft plea shattered her resolve. The officers were relentless. They shifted, preparing to push harder against her front door. The tension twisted tighter, an unforgiving noose. With a deep breath, Emily prepared to face the men outside, the weight of her motherly instincts clashing against the dread that told her she was stepping into the lioness' den. In that moment, she realized there was no turning back. She had to fight for her son, and for the truth buried beneath the silence. Would she unveil the sinister secrets, or would the very forces intended to protect them pull them into darkness? The door creaked ominously, and the moment of truth loomed, threatening to devour her whole. The door seemed to sigh under the weight of her decision, the creaking a sound almost palpable in the stillness. Emily gripped the handle, her palms slick with sweat, heart racing like a trapped animal desperate to escape. Her mind screamed for a plan, a way to maneuver this unexpected confrontation. But all thoughts fled as the officers' voices sliced through the tension. "Open up, Emily. We don't have time for games," the first officer said. His tone sharpened, a predatory edge that set her teeth on edge. "Please, Mommy." Lucas's voice trembled again. The desperation in his young plea cracked through her resolve, igniting something primal within her. She turned slowly, looking into the darkened hallway where she could feel him, vulnerable and terrified. "I need you to stay quiet, Lucas. Just stay hidden." With one last look at her son, she turned back to the door, knowing that the barrier between them was rapidly becoming inadequate. If she let them in, what darkness would spill across her threshold? "Last chance," the second officer warned, and the shift in his tone sent ice slithering down her spine. Without thinking, Emily twisted the knob, heart hammering as the latch clicked open. The door swung inward with a reluctant groan, revealing the two officers, their faces a mix of stern authority and something darker simmering beneath. There was no warmth, no comfort in their presence, only threat. "What's this about?" she managed, her voice a mere whisper, but inside she was screaming. "We're investigating," said the first officer, stepping inside with a confidence that made her feel sick. "You wouldn't want to obstruct justice, would you?" "Justice?" She spat back, the word a bitter taste in her mouth. "You think you're here for justice?" Ignoring her indignation, he continued, "We just have a few questions about your neighbors. The Evans family." "Why?" she demanded, eyebrows knitting together. The Evans had been a shadowy presence in the neighborhood, spoken of in hushed tones, but they had long since faded from her mind. "Because they're not the only ones missing, are they?" he replied, his eyes darkening with an intensity that filled her with unease. Before she could respond, the second officer stepped closer, looking toward the hallway, his gaze sharp and probing. "Where's your boy, Emily?" A surge of panic clawed at her throat. Instinctively, she stepped sideways, blocking the view of the dark hallway. "He's not feeling well," she said, knowing it was a weak excuse. "Ma'am, we need to see him," the first officer interjected, his voice oozing a calm that had no right being so close to the chaos brewing inside her. Why do you need to see my son?" She could feel the walls closing in, the air heavy with dread. "It's just a precaution," he answered smoothly, but the predatory glances exchanged between them told her it was more than that. With a sudden burst of defiance, Emily squared her shoulders. "I'm calling a lawyer." "You have no right to. Do you think you can shield him?" The second officer cut her off, leaning in menacingly. "From what's out there? You're not safe here, and neither is he." Emily's mind raced. They knew something about Lucas. Was it possible they were aware of the badge she had stashed away? The weight of her secret felt like a chainsaw of guilt digging into her conscience. She thought of the missing children. A few neighborhoods over, families were left heartbroken, searching for scraps of their loved ones. "Ma'am," the first officer said, lowering his voice to a deadly whisper, "we can protect him if you cooperate." The offer hung in the air, rancid and nauseating. She had heard whispers of corruption, tales of those who wore badges and took lives rather than saving them. "Open the door," Lucas's voice called from the shadows, unaware of the peril brewing outside. Everything changed in that fleeting moment. Emily's instincts screamed for her to protect her son, to snatch him away from the hands of the men who might lead their lives into horror. "Lucas, stay where you are," she shouted, heart hammering against her ribcage. The officers exchanged another laden glance, and in that instant, she realized. The true hunt had begun. What were they willing to do to get to her son? And what desperate choices lay ahead for her to keep him safe? The sound of her son's voice echoed in the confined space, slicing through the thick tension like a knife. Emily felt the world pivot around her. In that moment, every instinct cried out to protect, but the two officers loomed before her, their intentions unreadable. "Lucas, hide!" Emily shouted, forcing the words out through the tightening knot in her throat. She edged further into the doorway, praying to block the view of the hallway and whatever lurked behind her. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult," the first officer persisted, his lips curling into a thin line. "We can work together. Just let us see him." "See him? Why? So you can take him?" Panic surged like a tidal wave, and her fists clenched at her sides. "You're not taking my son." The second officer stepped forward, his eyes narrowing, a predator sizing up its prey. "We're not here for that yet. But if you don't cooperate, things can escalate quickly. You understand?" "I don't care what you think you understand," she shot back, her voice trembling but defiant. "You're not bringing him into this. I will not let you suddenly." A shout rang out from the hallway. "Mommy!" Lucas again, his voice fractured, caught somewhere between fear and confusion, igniting her fury. "Stop him!" She turned away from the officers, desperation flooding her veins as she lunged toward the hallway. But the second officer grabbed her arm, his grip like a vice. "Let go of me," she screamed, struggling against his hold. The sight of her son peering from the shadows melted her resolve into raw panic. "He needs to stay hidden," the officer hissed, pulling her back, and for a moment, she felt completely powerless. The world around her faded. The only thing that existed was the primal need to safeguard her child. "Mommy!" Lucas cried again, louder this time, edging closer, his small frame barely illuminated by the dim light filtering from the living room. "Lucas, get back!" Emily yelled, but the terror in her heart surged, mingling with a fierce protectiveness that brought tears to her eyes. She could see him now only a few feet away. The boy she loved, her lifeline, was slipping closer to impending danger. The officer's grip tightened, and dread coiled around her chest. She twisted, elbowing him in the stomach, desperation fueling her strength. For an instant, he let go, surprised at her sudden ferocity, but it was enough. Emily bolted forward, charging toward Lucas with open arms, her instincts taking charge. "All right, that's it," the first officer barked, lunging at Emily, but she was too quick, her heart pounding. She grabbed Lucas, scooping him up as he wrapped his arms around her neck. "Mommy, what is happening?" he whimpered, pressing his face into her shoulder, sensing the chaos swirling around them. She swallowed hard, fighting the tears as she looked back at the officers, the very fire of her resolve igniting. "You stay right here," she hissed into Lucas' ear before turning her full wrath onto the men blocking her escape. "Let us help you." The first officer's voice morphed into a menacing tone. "We can protect you both if you just let us do our job. You don't want to be the reason he gets hurt, do you?" Emily felt the rise of a horrific realization. The walls pressed in, and she was caught between the need for justice and the heart-wrenching decision to expose her boy to the wolves. "Get away from us," she screamed, breath sharp with adrenaline, trying to move toward the side door at the edge of the living room. But as they barreled forward, she caught a glimpse of something glimmering in the darkness, a shadow passing behind the officers. It was there, lingering, a figure for which she had no context, and yet all the context she needed to suffocate her heart with fear. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice wavering, knowing whatever lay behind them had teeth sharp enough to tear the fabric of their lives apart. The officers turned, their expressions shifting like the wind, and in that split second, Emily realized they weren't the only ones hunting. In the charged stillness, as shadows danced with grotesque whispers, the weight of desperation and the unknown loomed larger than ever. Just as the second officer's gaze narrowed into something primal, a chill ran down Emily's spine. What hunted them all waited just out of sight, and the hunt was far from over. As the truth edged closer, could she shield Lucas from not just the officers, but whatever lurked behind them? Emily pressed herself against the wall, heart racing, as her eyes darted between the officers and the dark corridor behind them. The tension hung heavy, smothering her with shards of fear. Lucas clung tightly, his small body shaking in her grip, and she wished desperately for a shield strong enough to protect him from what lay ahead. "Mommy, what is going on?" he whimpered, his voice laced with confusion. She could barely find the words. "Nothing, honey. Just stay quiet." The first officer stepped forward, his menacing presence driving a spike of adrenaline through her veins. "We need to take him with us now," he insisted, voice low and gravelly. "Please." Emily felt her throat tighten at the desperation in his tone, tinged with something darker beneath it, something that hinted this wasn't about safety. "You're not going anywhere near him, Ma'am. This is for your son's safety," the second officer interjected, but it sounded hollow, empty of compassion. A sound echoed from the hallway, chilling the air. A soft shuffle, a low whisper. The shadow moved again, slinking across the wall, slipping into the faint light like a figure crafted from nightmares. "Did you hear that?" she gasped, her composure fraying. The officers turned their heads, skepticism in their gazes. "Stop playing games. We're not here to hurt you," the first officer insisted, but Emily caught the uncertainty in his voice. "Get away from him," Emily shouted again, moving sideways toward the side door, her instinct to flee overwhelming her reason. And then she saw it, a glinting pair of eyes, brighter than the rest of the shadows. The figure, whatever it was, lingered just outside their view, its grotesque shape growing clearer amidst the dark. "It's right behind you," Lucas cried, terror piercing through him. Bitterness shot through Emily's heart. They were lying to her. They meant to use her, but they weren't the worst thing in the room. The officers divided their attention, eyes darting behind them. In that moment, Emily was a viper poised to strike. "Run, Lucas," she shouted as she shoved the boy toward the door, their only escape route. "Ma'am, we cannot allow that," the second officer yelled, lunging forward, but he was too slow. Tension snapped like a wire, a primal panic rushing her forward. "Mommy!" Lucas wailed, and Emily's heart shattered. She bolted for the door, gripping the handle as she glanced back. The officers, eyes wide, froze at the sight. Something dark churned in the shadows, coming alive, morphing into something horrific. The men cursed, scrambling to regain control, their confidence crumbling like dust. Emily's heart hammering in her chest. She flung the door wide open, and the chill of outside air rushed in, mingling with the stench of fear. The world waited beyond the threshold, cold and sharp, but it was better than what was lurking just behind her. "Mommy!" Lucas cried again, wrestling free from her grasp. "Lucas, no!" But before she could react, he darted past her into the night, the uncertainty of the world beyond swallowing him whole. "No!" Emily screamed, but her voice became a whisper drowned by something darker rising from the hallway. The swift sound of claws scraping against the floor, hungry and relentless, filled the air like a dreadful symphony. The officers tensed, eyes widening in sheer terror as the creature released a low growl, unmistakably hungry. Emily felt the dread engulf her. Whatever unseen horror awaited them in the shadows now flooded into the room. She wanted to retreat, to escape, but all she could think about was her son. In a frantic burst of energy, she dashed through the door, shouting, "Lucas!" Her voice trembled, slicing through the night's stillness, but it felt futile. The darkness beyond was alive. It embraced them all, an unfathomable abyss, echoing with Lucas's frightened cries. As they plunged deeper into chaos, Emily realized with horror that evading one nightmare did not mean escaping another. The terrifying truth lay ahead, veiled in darkness. But before she could confront it, a deafening growl erupted behind her. Would she find Lucas before the shadows snatched him away forever? Would she become just another victim to the horrors lurking in the night? The night air wrapped around Emily like a thick fog, cold and suffocating. She darted away from the doorway, heart pounding, her mind racing with thoughts of Lucas. The shadows danced menacingly at the edges of her vision. Panic surged through her. Was he safe? Had he found a place to hide? "Lucas!" She cried out again, desperation cracking her voice. Each step felt heavy, tethered by an invisible weight, the cold ground biting at her feet. She stilled, listening intently for a reply, but the only sound was the soft rustle of leaves, a reminder of the ominous presence lurking behind her. The officers were still framed in the doorway, frozen, as if the very creature that had captured their attention was holding them in its grip. The growl echoed once more menacing this time, reverberating through the night and coiling around her spine like ice. Emily took a shaky breath. The night promised safety, yet it was laced with dread. She had to make a choice. Would she search for Lucas or make a run for it, terrified that the entity would spring forth from the darkness? Time was slipping through her fingers like sand. Panic rising, her mind flashed to Lucas's face, his bright eyes, full of innocence and confusion. If she left him behind, would she ever see him again? Think, she murmured to herself, pacing in place. Suddenly, a scream shattered the stillness. One of the officers. "Get back! It's coming!" His voice trembled with terror, the sound slicing through Emily like a knife. She turned in horror as the dark figure emerged, fully formed from the shadows, tall and twisted. The officers stumbled back, fear etched in their features. The creature was a nightmare made flesh, its hunger palpable, its eyes glowing like coals in the dark. "Run!" one of the officers shouted, but the words barely registered in Emily's mind. She was transfixed, her body refusing to move. The world narrowed down to just her and the monstrous apparition slowly stepping into the light. She swallowed hard, reigniting her instincts. "Lucas!" She screamed again, the sound dragging her from the spell. Every nerve ending screamed at her to flee, but she couldn't leave him. She wasn't just a mother, she was a shield, a warrior ready to fight for her child. Suddenly, she heard him, faint but unmistakable, calling her name from a nearby cluster of bushes. Relief surged through her, momentarily dispelling the suffocating darkness. "I'm coming," she shouted, turning toward the sound. As she dashed toward the bushes, the creature lunged at the remaining officer, claws slicing through fabric and flesh. A gnarled scream erupted, blood spraying across the cold earth. Emily stumbled to a stop, paralyzed by horror, the sight draining the warmth from her veins. The second officer fell silent, the echo of his last breath hanging in the air like a ghost. "Get away from her!" A new voice broke through. It was another officer, one she hadn't seen until now. He emerged from a side alley, light glinting off his badge, wielding a flashlight as if it were a weapon. "Are you insane?" the officer yelled, directing the beam toward the monstrosity. The creature recoiled momentarily, hissing like a serpent. "Run! Get him!" Emily's heart hammered. This was her chance. "Lucas!" she shouted, the name bursting forth from her lungs as she dove into the thicket. Wild branches whipped at her skin, but she pushed through, desperate to reach him. "Mommy!" The cries were closer now. Emily's breath caught. She raced toward the sound, the crush of leaves underfoot muffled by the terror pounding in her ears. Just ahead, in the dim light of a flickering street lamp, stood Lucas. His small figure trembled, eyes wide with fright, locked in place. "Lucas!" she gasped, reaching for him, but before she could touch him, the growl returned, deeper and closer. In that moment she understood. The creature was not done. The chase had only just begun. "Run!" she screamed, and they sprinted into the shadows. Would they make it out alive, or would the night consume them both? As adrenaline coursed through her, the chilling realization took root. They weren't just running from the creature. They were running from the truth that lingered the darkest depths of the night. The branches thrashed against Emily like angry hands, scratching at her face and arms as she lunged forward. Lucas just a step away. The creature's growl resonated in the dark, a spine-chilling promise of doom. She grabbed Lucas's freezing hand, their fingers entwined as she pulled him through the dense underbrush. "Keep running," she urged, trying to imbue some strength into her voice. But how could she inspire courage when she felt so powerless? The dread pooled in her stomach like lead. The shriek of the remaining officer still echoed in her ears, the image of his lifeless body etched into her mind. She struggled to shake away the horror as they navigated the shadows, the fleeting glow of the street lamp behind them fading into darkness. "Mommy!" Lucas whimpered, glancing back, his breath coming in frantic gasps. "Don't look back. Focus on me," Emily commanded, forcing her own breath to stay steady. They plunged deeper into the darkness, hearts racing in tandem. The creature was relentless, an ominous force trailing close behind. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted, a loose clump of soil giving way. Emily stumbled, nearly losing her grip on Lucas. She regained her footing just in time, the gleaming eyes of the beast reflecting the faint moonlight, a blasphemous glow against the night. "Over here," she shouted, spotting a narrow alley between two buildings. It was a risk, a dark engulfing pit, but to remain in the open was certain death. She bolted for it, pulling Lucas along like a lifeline. As they dove into the alley, the brick walls closed in on them. The cloying scent of despair hung heavy in the air. She pressed her back against the damp wall, trying desperately to quiet their ragged breaths. Lucas's little frame trembled against her, and she felt the weight of his fear suffocating her own. "Mommy, are we safe?" he whispered, wide-eyed, scanning the alley for signs of the creature. Emily opened her mouth to reassure him, but before she could speak, the growl returned, reverberating off the walls, twisting the air with its malice. The haunting sound was closer this time. Emily hushed, her heart racing. She needed to calm Lucas, to keep him quiet. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but any movement could draw the creature to them. Footsteps echoed in the darkness. The pounding thud resonated like a death knell. Emily clutched Lucas tightly, their breath synced in unison. Sweat trickled down her back, pooling at the small of her back. "Maybe it will pass," she whispered, daring to hope, but the belief felt weak and fragile. Then they heard it, a sudden stop, a low snarl, and then silence. The world held its breath. Lucas barely breathed, his small voice barely a whisper. "What if it finds us?" Before she could answer, she felt the urge to move. It was instinctive, primal, a flash of a clue that spoke clearer than words. They couldn't remain trapped here, not with the abyss lurking too close for comfort. "Let us go," she hissed, heart pounding against her ribs, as she pulled him along once more. They turned the corner to find the exit of the alley, but what awaited them brought a gut-churning shock. Collapsed in a heap, obscured by shadows, lay old wooden crates. Emily could see the alley stretched ahead into a small courtyard, but before they could escape, the air shifted. Her stomach dropped as Lucas gasped. The creature loomed at the mouth of the alley, glistening teeth gleaming. It had cornered them. There was nowhere left to go. Its eyes burned with deadly hunger, and Emily instinctively backed up, shielding Lucas with her body. Darkness wrapped itself around them, tightening like a noose. "Lucas," she started, but the words died in her throat. What was left to say? They could either fight or succumb to the inevitable. She could feel her heart hammering, every pulse echoing an unspoken promise she would protect him. The creature lunged forward, its withering shadow swallowing the night. In the split second of panic, an unexpected figure burst onto the scene, cutting through the tension like a bolt of lightning. "Stop!" The sudden shout tore through the air, an indistinct silhouette emerging from the edge of the courtyard. Emily's mind raced. Could the stranger be friend or foe? The creature faltered, eyes shifting, torn between its prey and the newcomer. "Lucas, hold on tight," Emily yelled, but in that breathless moment, would they seize their escape or be trapped forever in the darkness? With dread gnawing at her insides, she prepared to find out. "Get back," the newcomer shouted, brandishing a flashlight that cut through the oppressive shadows. The beam flickered like a lighthouse in a storm, momentarily blinding the creature. Emily's heart raced not just from fear but a flicker of hope. Lucas squeezed her hand tighter, eyes wide with terror. The creature roared, a sound that shook the very ground beneath them. It hesitated, muscles tense, gnarled claws flexing as it adjusted to this new threat. Emily had only a moment to react before the situation spiraled into chaos. "Run, now," the stranger ordered, eyes darting. Emily didn't need telling twice. She grabbed Lucas and sprinted past the figure that appeared as a guardian in the pitch dark. They dashed out of the alleyway, the beams from the flashlight fading slowly as the creature darted forward. "Where are we going?" Lucas cried, glancing back, terror etched on his small face. "Just keep running," she yelled, panic lacing every word. Adrenaline surged, lending speed to her legs. They turned into another narrow street, brick walls looming on either side like a watchful audience. The sound of heavy footsteps clamored behind them, closer than ever. Emily's breath came in sharp gasps as she fought against the twisting hands of fear clawing at her insides. "Where's the officer?" Emily shouted, trying to keep her voice steady, but dread filled her gut again. Did they follow us? The figure had fallen behind them, the terrifying growl of the creature echoing louder. But when Emily dared to look back, she only caught a glimpse of movement. The stranger was still there, desperately wrestling with the beast, buying them precious seconds. "Let us head to the old warehouse," yelled the stranger, suddenly beside them, a figure of assurance even amidst chaos. Emily barely registered his face, his features partially obscured by the shadows. "It's our best chance." Without thinking, Emily nodded. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows gaping like hollowed eyes. "Go. I'll buy you time," he shouted, and without waiting for a response, he turned back, flaring the flashlight directly into the creature's ferocious gaze. It flinched, rearing back momentarily. Emily dashed towards the entrance, pulling Lucas with her. She felt a surge of anger at the beast. They had fled too far to be caught now. They leaped through the doorway, the rancid air hitting them like a wave. The building had been long abandoned, its insides choked with darkness and decay. "We're safe," Lucas whispered, looking around at the shadows that crept along the walls like spirits of the past. "Not yet," Emily replied, straining to listen. The roar of the creature echoed ever closer, shaking the very floor beneath their feet. She spotted a ladder leading up to a catwalk, her mind racing for any possible escape. "What if it finds us?" Lucas asked, a tremble in his voice. "It won't. Just stay close," she said, reassured by her own words. There was no other choice. She grasped Lucas's hand and began to climb, each step creaking ominously under their weight. As they reached the top of the catwalk, Emily peeked over the edge just in time to see the creature burst inside, nostrils flaring, searching. It prowled the ground, its growl deepening. "We can't stay here," she whispered urgently, but just when she thought they might evade it, the stranger's voice crackled through, filled with a desperation she had never heard before. "Get out of there. It's coming." Frozen, Emily's heart sank. She hadn't needed the reminder. Suddenly the floor beneath her trembled, an ominous thudding that reverberated through her very bones. An instinct, a horrifying certainty told her the creature was more than just a predator. "What if it knows we're up here?" Lucas's small voice trembled against the cacophony below. They could either hide in the shadows or confront whatever awaited them in the depths of the building. "Emily!" A shout pierced through the din, coming from below. Heart racing, she glanced down, but before she could respond, the floor shifted again. Everything shifted. Then she felt it. Something was crawling towards the beams of the catwalk, dragging its way, moving under the wooden structure. It was not just hunting them. "Lucas, we need to go," she said, her voice quaking. Now as she looked down, she thought she saw the creature's eyes peering up at them through the gaps. And then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed something glinting under the pale moonlight filtering through the broken windows. Her heart sank. The horror was only beginning to unravel. "We're not alone," she whispered to Lucas, fear tightening her throat. What else lurked in the shadows? The darkness crouched around them, a living thing breathing heavily, feeding off their fear. Emily gripped Lucas's hand tighter, each creak of the catwalk sending shivers down her spine. "We can't stay up here," she murmured more to herself than to Lucas, who was staring wide-eyed at the lurking shadows below. The echoing growl of the creature throbbed through the walls of the warehouse like a beating heart. It had to be close, closer than they wanted to believe. Emily forced herself to look down again, her stomach twisting. The creature prowled chaotically beneath the catwalk, its massive frame casting grotesque shadows across the cracked floor. Lucas's voice was barely above a whisper, trembling. "What is that noise?" She felt it, a rhythmic scratching and scraping, not from the creature but from somewhere deeper inside the warehouse. A chilling realization washed over her. Whatever lurked in the shadows wasn't finished just yet. She could see the flicker of movement just ahead, another darkness creeping towards them. "Lucas, stay here," she commanded, even as uncertainty clawed at her. She needed to find out what was happening down below. What was making that horrible sound? One after another, splintered crates teetered ominously, threatening to collapse in a heap. Rounding the bulk of a rusted conveyor belt, she got a glimpse of something unnatural darting away from the light. It moved quickly, unnaturally fluid. A flash of silver caught her eye, a shard of metal or something worse. Whatever it was, It wasn't just the creature that filled the dark corners of the warehouse. "It's coming this way." Lucas's shout broke her trance. Just as she turned to rush back, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows beneath. It was hunched, its skin glistening and slick. The stranger's flashlight swung erratically, illuminating its grotesque features, dilated eyes fixating directly on her. "Emily!" the stranger shouted as he ducked and weaved, struggling to fend off the creature's attention. He coughed, and a spray of blood speckled the floor, but he still fought. The torchlight pulsed like a heartbeat, but between them lay growing darkness. The creature's growl intensified as it lifted its head, tongue flicking out, tasting the air. Emily's instincts screamed at her to flee, but the helpless sight of the stranger standing strong against the beast held her in place. "Run! I'll hold it!" he yelled, desperation laced through his throat. "No," Emily said, horrified at the idea of leaving him. "We can't just leave you. Just go. Don't let this thing take you too." And then, abruptly, another sound cut through thudding, clawing something else was on the move. Emily felt Lucas tug on her shirt. "Please, Emily. We have to get out." The creature flinched, pouncing towards the stranger. And for the briefest moment, Emily's breath caught. Time stopped, but just like that, the horrible realization gripped her heart. They were not only trapped between a beast, now two monsters were closing in. "Come on," she shouted back at Lucas, pulling him towards the small path leading deeper into the shadows. "This way." They darted along the catwalk, but just as they reached the other side, the floor below erupted. The creature had lunged, causing old wooden beams to splinter. A cacophony of noise followed the stranger's scream, swallowed by the chaos. Suddenly, a heavy thud sent tremors through their feet. But worse was the sound of something slipping beneath the catwalks, the sound of claws trailing along the wood, almost as if it were inviting them down. Through the cracks in the boards, pale shapes shifted in the dim light. With every fiber of her being, Emily knew running was not enough anymore. They couldn't escape forever. "Emily?" Lucas looked up at her, eyes wide like saucers. "What do we do?" She looked around frantically, faced with a decision riddled with dread and desperation. "Stay close," Emily whispered, steeling herself. "We have to face it." The darkness swelled around them, pulsing with hunger. They had awakened it, and she sensed its wrath was not merely physical. What else was waiting in the night? As she prepared for the unimaginable, a chilling whisper grazed her ear, a voice from the shadows, so close she could almost see it. "You can't hide forever." Emily shivered, knowing the true horror was yet to come. What other secrets lay buried in the dark? Emily's heart raced, wild and erratic. A flood of fears crashed over her, but beneath it all bubbled an essential determination to protect Lucas. "We face it head-on," she murmured, steeling herself against the encroaching dread. The shadows around them flickered ominously. The growling had transformed into tortured howls, echoing as if calling from the very depths of hell. "Lucas, we need to find a weapon," she said, reclaiming her focus. She scanned the broken remnants of the warehouse, desperate for anything that could keep them alive. Together, they slithered along the catwalk, clambering over debris, dim beams of light cutting through the gloom like knives, illuminating scattered tools and remnants of a long-forgotten industry. Emily grabbed a rusted pipe, its weight reassuring in her grasp. "Hold on," she whispered to Lucas, tightening her grip on him as they stepped carefully toward an area where moonlight seeped through the shattered windows, creating patches of silver light soaked with tension. Lucas's small hand found hers, grounding her as uncertainty shadowed their strides. Suddenly, a growl sharpened the air, and before Emily could react, the floorboards beneath them bucked suddenly. She felt the vibrations pulse like a heartbeat the creature was hunting. "Run!" Emily shouted, grabbing Lucas's wrist, pulling him to safety as he clung desperately to her side. They rushed to a nearby door, solid wood, perhaps their escape. She slammed into it, and for a moment when it didn't budge, panic flared. "Please," she pleaded, shoving again, harder. The door creaked, hesitated, and then finally cracked open, revealing a darkened corridor far beyond their current nightmare. "Go," she urged, pushing Lucas through the opening. As he stumbled inside, she edged behind just as the growl turned into a feral roar, a warning that made her heart freeze. The creature loomed nearer, sniffing, searching. Emily felt the flush of fear blossom, squeezing her insides until her breath caught. She stepped through and slammed the door just as she caught sight of the beast claws splintering through the wood. With a trembling breath, Emily turned to Lucas, who was staring wide-eyed into the thick darkness of the corridor. "We're okay," she whispered, desperately holding on to that tiny spark of hope. But safety was fleeting. From the blackened corridor, shadows began shifting, growing. Something was there with them. "Stay behind me, Lucas," she urged, raising the pipe defensively, though it felt like nothing against the horrors looming before them. Flashes of eerie shapes writhed close, sounds of whispered taunts curling around them. Another growl, sharper this time, slashed through the darkness, a promise of danger that sent chills racing through her. "What are they?" Lucas asked, voice barely a trembling breath. "I don't know," Emily replied, panic clawing at her throat, "but we need to move. We have to keep going." They pushed deeper into the corridor, their feet shuffling silently across the cold concrete. Adrenaline surged through honestly, but the ache in her chest gnawed at her. How had it come to this? Friends, neighbors, protective figures turned into monsters. It felt like a twisted reflection of a life once deemed safe. But for Lucas, she would dig deep. They rounded a corner, the corridor stretching ahead into an expansive room littered with debris. Surrounded by walls that echoed their footsteps, each thud brought them closer to the void. With holdings of desperation tethering her more than fear, Emily stopped, spotting something glimmering in a jagged pile of refuse. "Lucas, stay here," she commanded, infusing strength into her voice despite trembling knees. She approached cautiously, fingers brushing through broken glass and rusty tools until they landed on a glimmering frame, a handgun. The darkness trembled around them as the growls grew louder, murderous intent clawing its way toward them. With shaking hands, she picked it up, eyeing the gun like a lifeline. "I can fight back," she reminded herself, heart racing in agreement. "Mommy, what is that?" Lucas whispered, stepping cautiously toward her. "It's for protection, love. Just stay close." She took a deep breath, trying to calm her pulse. Emily glanced around, the world a blur of shadow and noise. There were too many unseen threats, too many questions. Then she saw him, the stranger who had bought them time. He staggered into view, bloodied and frail but still standing. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, sheer urgency propelling him toward them. "Join us," she shouted back, rallying hope as she noticed the creature rearing up in the hallway behind him. "No," the stranger shouted, voice brittle with pain. "Go. I can't hold it off forever." "No," Emily screamed, "we can help," but it was too late. With one devastating roar, the creature lunged for him. The resounding crack of bone splintering echoed through the corridor like thunder. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, unable to witness the horror. But Lucas pulled her hand sharply. "Mommy, we can't just leave him." "Lucas, we have to go now," she urged, feeling the weight of their fate pressing around them like a vice. "No," he shrieked, fear blooming. "We can't just." Emily tugged him along again, finally crushing the pain caused by her own hope to protect everyone in those split moments. "We will find a way out," she promised, though dread clawed harder as they pressed forward. With ranks of shadows thickening around them, the corridor twisted, flickering like a dim flame caught in a draft. What fresh perils awaited them further in? Through night and terror, they would face together. "Mommy?" Lucas's voice cut through her turmoil. "What? They're coming." Her heart sank as the distant growls grew louder, more pronounced. Emily gripped the handgun tightly, ready to fight and navigate through literal nightmares. They were terrifying truths lurking within halls forged from despair. "We're going to keep moving, no matter what," she vowed, eyes blazing with belief. "We will make it out." Their determination sailed them down a path drenched in darkness, where every step echoed like a relentless heartbeat hammering for survival. As thin beams of light flickered in the edges, she knew they were pressing deeper into danger, but she had to believe in one certainty. They wouldn't surrender to the night. With growing dread, pressing fears, and the shadows closing in, Emily understood that whatever haunted them was relentless. But together, they stepped boldly into the unknown with open hearts, unrelenting strength. The bond of love pushing them forward into a night that promised just maybe it wasn't a dead end after all. And with that fierce spirit alive inside them, they would uncover the truth hiding in the darkness and battle the forces woven into the unforgiving night.